speaker. All right. So anyway, I'm Thoreau Lovell. I'm the co-publisher of Wet Cement Press, which is based here in Berkeley, California, and in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm really happy to welcome you all to the celebratory reading for Chris Sawyer-Laucanno, and who, as you know, who passed away last year, late last year, and his book, Anything You Want, which we brought out at Wet Cement Press last spring. Um, so, Chris was as you all know, he was a poet, a translator, a librettist, a biographer, a memoirist, a painter, an architect, a scholar, a professor, a pianist, and all sorts of other things, including, as I've been told, a fabulous cook. So he had a lot of lives, different lives, intertwined and separate from each other. From my point of view, I first met Chris a few years ago, a few years before he passed, and that led us to working together on his book, Anything You Want. And what strikes me most about that time of working with Chris, a period when he was really in and out of the hospital over and over again and besieged with an array of really serious medical challenges, was how easy it was to work with him. Even at that point in his life, knowing he was very close to the end, Chris still wanted to make new connections, establish new relationships, and try to help new friends. It was really extraordinary to be part of that. Then when I think about the poetry in Anything You Want, which for me tracks the process of disembodiment, sort of consciousness and language separating from the body, moving into another dimension, like old friends who have left but are still visible through the window. I am deeply moved by Chris's example. So once again, I want to welcome you all to this reading, and with that, I'm going to hand it over to his old friend and colleague, John Ninso. Hi. John?
Thank you, Thoreau, and thank you, everyone. I'm just really happy to see so many old friends and appreciative for us having this opportunity to honor Chris as well as Patricia. And they were inseparable, so there's no way to really think of one without the other. And, most of us here have spent various dances together. So it's great to have this one with you. And I'm actually going to read from the tribute I wrote to Anything You Want. Read from it. The quiet advances as best it can until my voice is able to reach me. Christopher Sawyer-Laucanno was a person of many lives, not only in his prolific and fecund outpouring of imagination, nor in all of the countries he traveled and lived, studied and wrote, nor the innumerable people he counseled and taught, but also in the many moments he walked up to the edge of death, only to surprise us all and come back to write another brilliant book, as he has, and gifting us yet one more to care for in anything you want. In the realm of his poetic manifestations over 5 decades, Anything You Want stands as his magnum opus, a final salutation of gratitude to all he experienced and loved, and to all of us who love him. In pulling forth his immense chi and vitality of mind and heart, he managed, under often quite dire physical conditions, to reveal the mystery and secret of his bountiful creativity by fully exploring spheres beyond life and death, or coming and going, in a verse that simultaneously invents and forges koans for us who lament his passing, and in the end, for us to discover the old maestro hasn't gone anywhere at all. East, west, north, south, everything is all right. Everything is all right or not all right. Only for me, everything is all right. Those lines from the Zen master Kuan Lang were among Christopher's favorites, and we often quoted them. He often quoted them to me on our daily letters and koan exchanges that began he that began after his first diagnosis with cancer over a decade ago. A quiet Zen master of his own making, Christopher embodied the meaning of this koan with an indefatigable gusto and cheer, frequently reminding me of what one of his teachers had once said to him when he and his family were living in Japan. Teacher, I'm discouraged. What should I do? Encourage others, his teacher responded. And that's what Christopher did: encouraged, coached, or consoled the countless writers and friends who came to him for counsel with their own books, creative projects, or illnesses, or despair with the world's plight, or those of their own personal lives. In some ways, Quinglang's "Only for Me, Everything is All Right" echoes Chris's fierce passion for life with his cherished family and in his own poems, translations, and stories, as well as in his social and political convictions over a lifetime of caring for the world, its environment, social justice, and equity, and everyone he met, taught, and from whom he continuously learned. Moments rearrange themselves as they will. Each has its own beauty, its own perfect symmetry. Symmetry is, in large part, what Anything You Want invites us to find out for ourselves. It's also, in part, revealed in what he learned from another of his friends and teachers, Peter Matheson, who once said to him, "Our purpose in life is to help others through it." With his beloved wife and partner in all things, the extraordinary poet Patricia Pruitt, together they supported and nurtured a network of writers and artists around the globe, from Paris and Tangier to Tokyo and Istanbul, and often hosted readings and salons in their own welcoming home, or grass hut, as Chris liked to refer to it, once they settled in Turner's Falls. Theirs is a great love story. Christopher and Patricia were renowned in the town and active in every aspect of the town and county's life. They participated in as well as created communities. As Lawrence Ferlinghetti once remarked while introducing Chris at City Lights in San Francisco, Christopher is famous among the famous. So many of us were constantly amazed by his stories about the influential thinkers and writers he spent time with on his continuous pilgrimages around the globe. He was a poet, translator, biographer, librettist, memoirist, pianist, architect, scholar, professor, and pianist, as well as fabulous cook. This book, and indeed his whole life, is a testament to the power of poetry, of all forms of creative imaginings, and he lived it with humility, kindness, simplicity, a deep joie de vivre, and with profound wisdom, as well as a lively and generous sense of humor. In Anything You Want, you will find these characteristics chiseled through time and timelessness with a precision rarely sustained in language's infinite potential for revealing both the reality of everyday life and what the poet Osip Mandelstam once called the what should be. The poems wander through the realms of birth and death, loss and abundance, radical acceptance, and on further through the smallest miraculous details of tenderness for how we live and help one another. He wrote them for us with verve, compassion, meditation, and in a continuous practice, in spite of his increasing weakness this past year while approaching his final departure from the body. In this way, the poems too become coins for discovering and welcoming the questions of our own life and the miracles waiting to be found. Chris would encourage that, as he encouraged countless others to dive more fully into the beauty and poetry of their own lives. This verse is a complete emergence into an imagination beyond imagination. Thank you, Christopher. We're always meeting.
Hey, thanks, John. So Sarah, I think you're gonna go next, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm gonna go next, and I'm a little rambling. I was gonna just read some reflections I've had this summer as we experience this loss and living with it. So I might get a little sad, but and then when we first came back to the house after Chris passed, and I don't know, we were going through the dining room table, we found this little notebook, and it must have been like it's their idea book. So this was something they were working on. It's only got like 5 pages written in it. I don't know when this was from. It might be from like when my mom was ill, because there's a reference to health. But anyway, so I was going to read that list because it's a great list, and then read one of the poems. Okay, so these are just my reflections, just my thoughts on living like this. Okay, reflecting. I miss, and this is for both my parents, really. So I miss their wry humor in the face of difficulties, extreme or mild. Having the ear of the most smartest, circumspect, caring people. The constant contact up to 3 times a day, 7 a.m., lunchtime, and then good nights, and we repeat. I just came back from Japan with my kids to take my kids to Tokyo, do the pilgrimage. And upon landing back in Hartford after our trip to Tokyo, my first thought was I better call Chris and let him know we landed. And then I rephrased that and said, I just hope he knows we did. So the gift he and our mom gave us in taking us to Tokyo took such root in my identity as a young adult. It's funny now, Tokyo has like these wishing trees, which I don't remember, just those wishing trees you can write in with paper and stuff. I don't remember those from when we lived there, but they're all over the place now. So the trains ran randomly throughout the city, and I stopped at each one to send a message to my mom and Chris, as well as love notes to Tokyo itself. Me and my kids did that. The trip to Tokyo was cathartic, emotional, triumphant, and in a wonderful way to remember just one facet of the legacy that my mom and Chris left us. And then just my thought of I'm living in the house with Aisha and my niece Aisha and my son Felix, and their friends are coming. And so I just wanted to say, I think Mom and Chris would be so happy that there's young life breathed into this, and into this what could have been like a mausoleum or museum to them. And so I feel really good about that. So that's where I am now. So must-haves. This is their list. Must-haves, P and me. New perspectives, intelligence, centeredness, body. A house with ample space for studies and a guest room. Income, independence from an 8-to-5 job, projects, spirit, desirable location, space, green, water. Involvement with Aisha, Felix, Ava, Imogene, Sarah, and Jessica, friendships, and travel. And the next part is, would like to continue, but not necessary. Big house, Turner's Falls, and this is I found interesting, was health was on there. It's just like, I don't know if they were foreseeing the future. Chuck, non-body being, overloaded responsibility to others, non-responsiveness to our needs, isolation and self, and quite a few objects. I just thought that was so charming. But anyway, all right, so now I'm going to read the poem from page 33. Can you guys hear Dorito? I shut him in the other room, but I don't know, like he doesn't like me talking to other people. Okay. Moving deliberately this morning amid myriad artifacts gathered over time and then even more time, enclosed in one's own making, collecting, acquiring, a way of remembering a past, but also forgetting a present. Really love that. So thank you.
Sarah,
So I think, Lisa, are you there? Lisa,
there's some problem with the sound.
I know somebody's
Christopher gave.
Maybe everyone needs to be.
right.
He was reading it for translation. Translation of.
Sounds like, okay, I think it's cleared up. So Lisa, why don't you unmute?
I think I am. Am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And hopefully my dog will not interrupt.
Welcome.
So I think it's interesting, Thoreau, that you mentioned Chris in the window, because for me, Chris was always a window, never a door. He was always exposing something beyond where you were. And of course I miss that. And the one word that I think of when I think of Chris is the word grace, because to me, Chris personified grace in everything that he did. His writing, his friendships, everything about him was graceful, and that is a very rare human being. Anyway, so I will read you the 3 poems that can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The quiet advances as best it can until my voice is able to reach me. Now it's just a matter of extracting the verbs from nouns and excessive adverbial gestures. Second poem, page 26. In the Upanishads, we find this: by the word alone is the non-word revealed. Language is the way in to non-language, even though occasionally we would jettison words to arrive directly in a place beyond linguistic cacophonous confusion. Such vainglory, writing words in an attempt to reveal the non-word. And the last one, page 27. To transpose actualities, to discover that ghost that lives, or that bee pollen collects on trees. Bend back the artifice, rearrange the demonstrable, denotations until they become connotations. Metaphor triumphs over metonymy, even if the original question gets blurred, and the answer, even if one exists, becomes lost in a world of possibilities.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So Cliff, I think you're up next.
Yes, thank you. Well, I would just say that I was late in meeting Chris and Patricia, we invited them to Istanbul to teach in our department, and they came for a couple of years. Patricia stayed a year, Chris stayed 2 years, and they made themselves beloved by our students and all of the writers and poets in the city. Everybody was happy that they were there, and we stayed in touch after that. And I agree completely with what John has said about Chris, so I won't repeat that. I will just say it was a privilege and a pleasure to know them both. And and I am amazed by this last book of poetry of his. So I'm going to read the poem on pages 72, 73, which goes like this. The river below is cast in shadow, though sun illuminates the hills. My little dog cavorts upon the grass, rolling now and then within the green, taking care to avoid even the slightest stone, not caring too much to roam. I have more than a little desire to roam, move well beyond my looming shadow, not remain as fixed as a tree or stone, wander up and beyond the hills, seek out new varieties of green, discover new flowers and fresh grass. I long, like Rambo, to walk barefoot on the grass, follow my feet wherever they care to roam, knowing that I will not stay within the green, but find light and dark and lengthening shadow as I stride and strut up and down the hills, not fastened to earth as is a stone. Maybe I'll rest for a while, perched on a stone, then refreshed, traipse through the bending grass, following the birds that call from distant hills, happy to wander, to be, to roam, without fear of the dark or of any shadow, even when I can no longer see the grass. Green, oh, how I love you, green, even the moss that gathers on a stone that changes in color, in light and shadow, as does each waving blade of grass, I encounter each moment as I roam within the valley between the hills. The stream flows downward from the hills, its water changing from blue to green. Along its gently winding banks I roam, hoping to cross by hopping from stone to stone, to a light on the other side amidst new grass, feel the new light before the descending shadow. In the glade, the peaks cast their shadow, causing me to pause, content now not to roam, just gaze and wonder at trees and shrubs and grass. Thank you.
Nice.
Norman, I think you're next.
Thanks, Thoreau. Can you hear me okay, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to be here and see all of you. And it's sad to lose another great poet and friend. It's different when somehow a poet goes and the work is still there. So it's a kind of an odd.
Yeah.
They're there and they're still here. They're gone and they're still here. I knew Chris mostly through correspondence and our mutual connection with Ed Foster, who is the publisher of Talisman House books. And I had some books with Talisman House. And when it was hard to figure out how to get a hold of Ed and what was Ed doing, it was always Chris who was on top of Ed and knew how to talk to Ed. And he was local, so he could figure out what Ed was up to. And so he was his compassion and steadiness in that endeavor was really impressive. And so I came to really see him as a wise soul. And he was, as everybody's saying, a very wise soul. And it's an old-fashioned and beautiful thing, the poetry of wisdom. You don't see it very much anymore because who has the nerve to set themselves up as a poet of wisdom, and yet Chris was so straightforward and humble in his way of being that he could pull it off. And this book is really terrific, I think. And I'm glad that John read from his introduction, because John's introduction is really perfect to set off this jewel of a book. And it really is a long series of wisdom poems written from the point of view of a person who clearly has not only experienced the loss of someone that he loved his whole life, and but also was facing his own end. And so the poems come so much from that soil, and every single one of them reflects that in a different way. So I've chosen three of them to read consecutive, starting on page 52. There is a certain vitality present in the abrupt change from day into night, just as the difference is acute between disproportion distracting you from the gradual growing belief that you and this very moment are one. Interloping instances abound. Steer us away from what we used to think was resolve, to harness our desire for understanding. Our intent now is as elusive as those cluttered jottings that have become indecipherable. What we originally intended as reminders of something we might otherwise forget are as useless as a scribbled grocery list. Deterred from whatever it was we were trying to do, our mission not any longer of much use, just a heap of accretions, unimportant deflections, hardly a deciphering metaphysics for exploring the unknowable. So again, I'm really glad to be and honored to be included among all of you and among Chris's friends. And these are sacred occasions, and they're what poetry is made for, I think. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Norman. Michael, Franco.
Greetings.
There you are. Hey.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
I would add one thing to your list of Chris's accomplishments, and I think it probably goes across the board for everybody sitting here, and that was he was a friend beyond compare. The friendship that I shared with him and Patricia for 30 years was as essential as I can imagine. And it was a friendship that one was never sitting here grimacing or trying to put up with Chris for this or that. It was always just this beautiful exchange of support and love and encouragement, and that just never ended. And I just miss it so much in these days since his passing. So in turning to the book, I thought that I should read the opening passages that Chris put in there, the opening quotes for the book. Anything you want. Octavio Paz responding to a question about what his poems mean at Harvard, 1974. Writers don't own their words. Since when do words belong to anyone? Your very own words, indeed. And who are you? Words are how we understand the known. Pardon me, the koans. But who knows whether the words actually convey what some old master said? And who really knows what the words really are trying to say? A paradox as great as any koan. So what do we do? Point our fingers at the moon. And this is Chris. Mind does not provide a solution. Not sure the body does either. A weak, old voice somewhere, seemingly in the distance, but also inside. All but inaudible, except for a phrase here and there. And what does one hear? Single syllables, traces of words, a sound before sound, all pointing backwards or inward or outward. Whatever it is that fabulous multiple mysteries, one of what should be ordinariness, engenders a mental landscape of jumbly packed within another jumbly. Etymology fails. All we can do is cut through coincidence, sound, make tonality sing for us without a need to understand. And then this is at the very end of the book. In the spring air, a welter of sounds. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing in the light that I'm sitting in. In the spring air, a welter of sounds of monotonous commonalities. But all seems exactly as it should. There is hardly a need for fixation or unreliable. Forgive me. Let me catch myself. I hadn't thought about reading these out loud and to people. And when this book was handed to us at Chris's memorial, it became an instant little treasure that I gave one to my son, and we've both been carrying it around and poking into it over and over again. And to hear right now the sounds of Chris out loud as they are in my head is a grand reminder and a painful reminder all at the same time.
Yes.
So let me see if I can do this. In the spring air, a welter of sounds, of monotonous commonness, but all seems exactly as it should. There is hardly a need for fixation or unreliable aspiration. Naivete is a plausible excuse to extend the lack of foresight. Downhill or uphill mean only the direction in which we are going. The eye, the ear, and occasionally the nose, or a tongue, skin, create the likeness that bind phenomena to us. In sensory experience, simplify a reflective system of analogy tumbling on top of another analogy? Or is it something more, something as leaving the mind behind the eye to make some scene of each contour haphazardly happening upon us? A hawk floating, a prickly pear, a rose.
Hey, Andrea, I think you're next.
Hmm.
Hard
It's
act to
just,
follow, huh?
it's just so moving to hear you all share and read these wisdom poems and think about how we all are so interconnected through Chris, all the stories we know well and hear of how he supported all of us and so many others. And Patricia, uh, being here with some of you, uh, Lisa and Cliff, remembering how we first really got to know Chris and Patricia was when we went to Istanbul in 2006 for a reading, invited by Edward Foster and Cliff at Kadir Has. Little did we know that some years later we would be teaching there at the university. And then hearing from Sara, who just returned from the pilgrimage to Tokyo, and how we ended up in Tokyo some years ago after Patricia passed and went to her beloved temple there. And through Kismet, and I think Chris and Patricia really embodied the Kismet, or as the Chinese would say, the Yo Yu and Fen, these connections that are meant to happen. And they were always making those connections happen. And then how you, Sara, and your daughters went there. And just the incredible friendship and support and family. So this is really moving. And now here we are in Whitstable by more Kismet, where Chris and Sara and Patricia and Jessica lived many years ago. So it's all so amazing. In a different manner, veering toward the light, away from shadows halting, then going on without us, a shadow world without disruption. There seems to be little difference between drowsiness and wakefulness, just the striking coincidence of a no or two piled up on top of a yes. Air quite still, shut in, shut out. Dust gathers. So does the cloud moving somewhere in the dark, searching for a smidge of light. Hints of remembrance cluster at the tail ends of imagination, shift shapes, bend into vagueness, teeter on obscurity's brink. Decipherment is difficult, but descriptors still emerge as connected or ajar as pigeons in a square. We once saw this or that, knelt there, stumbled there, gripped the ladder rungs, stood still in the snow. We make lists we can remember. We make lists so we can remember to remember. Scratch items off, whether completed or just because they don't matter any longer, add others that we feel are required here for too and so important overlooked necessity, then realize that maybe none of this matters much at all. Begin again.
So Uche, I think you're next, if you're there. I didn't see you sign in. Did you guys,
Uche is there, but he's muted.
He's here under his daughter Sula.
Sula is the name of his screen, but he's
okay, so let me see if I can unmute him then.
yeah.
Hang tight there. Sula, huh? All right. Yes, got it. All right, it's not letting me unmute. So Sula, can you hear me? If you can, it looks like you're going to need to unmute yourself, because the only option I have is to ask you to unmute.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. First of all, I thank John and Andrea for introducing me to Chris. John has already spoken about him to me various times, in our endless conversations. And until I met Chris face to face, I couldn't understand quite well what John was saying about his personality and his power. All I can say is that I learned so much from Chris. I only met him about twice. He hosted I and my family in his place, this big place in Turner. And it was like an endless fest. We came for a poetry festival, but those festivals did not stop where the readings took place. He continued in his house almost all night. I met various writers in that particular orbit. I remember Fanny Hall, who just left. It was actually at that particular moment that I first met also Fanny, who read at that festival, the Pioneer Valley Poetry Festival. I think it's the second edition. And I remember my partner, Fiona Gardner, asking Chris questions almost nonstop, as if it was an inquisition. And Chris was just smiling his way. And I'm like, look, why are you asking all these questions? Please just leave her alone. He was that generous, he was that patient. And to me, these are marked characteristics that I still see that he embodied, and which I think he actually exudes around anybody around him. And looking at his own writings, apart from the person that he was, there is something very clean about Chris' writing. I don't hear literary theories behind his work. There is a freshness to the lines. He seems to experience life directly and writes about it the way he experiences it, without thinking about fashion or literary groups or definition of what he was trying to do. And that takes courage these days, where everybody wants to belong to a group, because in that way, perhaps you get more known. I think he was an outlier. And it was through him I read Patricia's work, his wife's work. Both of them are just outliers as far as I'm concerned as poets. I've taught them, in some schools that I taught their work. And till now, I'm still reading those poems and learning from them and practically imbibing the courage behind those words and allowing the mystery take its place. So let me read from his work, from his new work, which, as we could all see, titled. There just seems to be poem after poem after poem relating to each other in some kind of mysterious way, because this is not actually chronological. It's not linear. We would like to have something meaningful to say a pronouncement worthy of the long horizon that beckons us to move forward. But we are tongue-tied at exactly the moment when we should be speaking to the sunlight that is creating pools of light between the river and the tree-lined shore beyond. Perhaps that is the only articulation we need. It has already embodied itself in our phrasing that refuses to arrive at words derived from our ears and eyes. Conspicuous similarities linger between latent and patent, a vindication, we might say, of flagrant anachronism. At that crossroads, when and where nothing prompts us to understand, despite countless glossaries and all-night guesswork. Systematized codification once our boat hull, somehow, somewhere, got tossed out the window. Anecdotal detail is left for the recognizing eye, but incredulity continues to abound. Equilibrium is elusive. Odd vectors pull against each other, create both attraction and repulsion. Colliding forces bounce from corner to corner, impeding an easy walk along the path. Yet, nothing is visible in the chill. Just a few clouds we hope will pass. Allow us to go for a stroll. Taking the early morning air. Smile at the scattering squirrels. Pay homage to a less complicated arrangement of force against force. Allow for movement forward of any sort. Instead, we are left squirming in our armchair. Say thank you, Chris.
Murat, I think you are next.
Yes. Thank you very much for, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much for organizing this occasion where we can share for a short moment the spirit that really who Chris was. And I've known Chris for over 30 years. He was so reticent about talking about his own achievements that it took me as many years to realize the wide range of the accomplishments that Chris was. And because of this time dimension, every time I saw him included an element of surprise about, Chris also did this or had this context. He wrote this kind of things. And outside that, Chris was a kind of touchstone for me. Whenever I had a problem with which I was having difficulty, not necessarily about poetry, about other things, I always called him and I asked for his reaction, what his thoughts are. Amazingly, almost every time I followed his advice. And also I'm very grateful to Chris because he had a contact with my work and expressed it in writing, not about what my writing was and so on and so forth, but he was always in touch with the struggle beyond these poems that created for me, moved me towards writing. That's what his writing about my work involved. And I will start just first with two pieces from Anything You Want, which is, I think, an absolutely beautiful book. We are becoming accustomed to sequences of hospitable intervals in which lists of necessities prevail over wants. There is no way around acceptance, no way out from an undercover haven. Instability is not a mutation of what used to pass for orderliness. It is its own order rising up to embrace us day in and day out. Observes and then continues to observe, said Stevens, which is a way of saying what a poem does, or a poet does either awake or sleeping. Exemplars depleted of dexterity still shine when the light hits them at the right moment. Make them seem almost exotic, as when walking through the woods on a cold morning, and suddenly the sun sends its rays bouncing through the branches. Just moments to remember, to take in as we can or will, to puzzle before we move on. At this point, I want to move to a poem of mine from a longer work called Camels and Weasels, which I think is very much in spirit in the space that Anything You Want is written. I want to read this poem as a tribute to Chris. Dynamism is cruel. Dreaming I jump into the ocean from a boat. To my surprise, the boat sails away. No one to save me now. Sea to sea to sea. I committed suicide without knowing. Now is my time to die. Mistake act. No mulligan to take. Life was too short. Now is long. Death is flying with a somewhat beauty. When clouds flew, the moon moved. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Simon.
Hello, you can hear me?
Yes.
You can hear.
Mhm.
Hi. What an honor, what a pleasure to be amongst you all. What a pleasure to salute this beautiful book and this beautiful, beautiful man and Patricia. Yeah, there's no way, as John said, that you couldn't separate those two. Dear, dear souls. I'm going to read three little poems from this book. Just before I do, I wrote a little piece on Chris for the Woody Partition or Cable Street is now, because I loved reading all Chris's autobiography there and learning more and more about this indeed extraordinary life, an extraordinary person. And so to indulge me, if you will, just before I read the poems, Chris was one of the happiest persons I ever met. Not happy in the dumb, blissed, stoned, oblivious, naive sense. Quite the opposite. He was an MIT professor, for goodness sake. He was among the most intelligent persons I ever met too, though he wore it lightly, sympathetic, understanding, and compassionate. I don't recall when or where we first met. Paris, Istanbul, Massachusetts. I do remember his name, that wonderful, exotic, polysyllabic name, surely a grandee, from the lips of our mutual friend, his French publisher, Karl Orend. And around the time, getting lost in and being impressed by an invisible spectre, his Paul Bowles biography. In fact, being impressed by what that might be, to be the biographer of Paul Bowles. Our friendship was one of mutual respect as poets. I recall reading with him alongside his good friend Mark Polizzotti, Andre Breton's biographer. I felt humbled in such exalted company. I remember passionate discussions about poetry and poets with another of our mutual friends, our remarkable talisman publisher, Ed Foster, honoring him again here. I was moved when in later years, Chris asked if I would be willing to write a blurb for one of his poems, Remission poem books. Yes, I said, I most certainly would. Written at an extraordinarily challenging time in his life, following the loss of his beloved wife, Pat, alongside his own ongoing perennial critical health issues, Remission shows surprisingly no mawkishness or self-pity, rather an inspiring commitment to life. An inspiring commitment to life, to continuing, still curious, contemplating its mysteries, but mostly now via simple quotidian observations. I speak there of Chris's heroic, permanent, immediate present. That quality postdates his passing. That was one of the particular things I admired in him. He will, happy to say, always be with us. And this book is a beautiful exemplar of that. It's an extraordinary speech from Eternal Book. Profundity never laid in ambush, waiting for me to arrive at a desolate crossroad. But a rooster that I mentally converted into a fighting cock once chased me into a ditch. Later, I thought I could have one big if I'd fixed spurs to that bantam and hauled it behind the bull ring. Now I've only got a little dog barking to go for a walk. It's somewhere like there we're trying to get to, but with lame walking, blind stepping, bird hopping. You see how it is? This is what I was trying to understand. This is what I thought I could understand. But then the sun went down and the bushes got creepy and the branches got wild and the idea of path got as tangled as memory. The completing words do not appear because you still believe in barriers, believe that time arcs in the moonlight. You haven't yet grasped that time is not separate from you, not marked by coming and going. The moment you went out of the gate, you swallowed up time, and time swallowed you. In great honor and pleasure to be reading Chris's poems. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And to conclude, I think we're going to go with Imogene, another relative, family member of Chris's. So Imogene, are you there? And connect?
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi,
Beautiful. There you are.
I'm Chris's granddaughter. I guess I don't have much to say before I start reading. I'll say more after, but I miss him so much every day. He was my best friend, also my grandpa. Just someone who's also a writer, and having someone like my grandparents to bring me up in such a world embedded in the aesthetic sublime in every sense of every corner of it was probably the most magical thing about being a human being on this earth for me. They taught me so much about how to live. So I'm just thankful to have had the magic of being related to them. Such a lucky chance. The poems I chose, I rolled dice to pick the page number. I thought my grandpa would get a kick out of it. And just it's impossible to pick anything to read because any of this book would be perfect. So, the first number rolled was 22. And then I'm just gonna read from 23 as well because I think it's nice. And then a couple more after that. In moving among the afterglow of shapes, those artifacts of the imagined, or perhaps actual world that once presented itself to the senses, a rather curious confrerie, sorry, I have a Invisalign in braces, so my speaking is kind of hard sometimes, emerges between one object and then another, one memory and then another, the way an adjective helps determine what it is we once felt, what we once believed to be absolutely true. Names interlope, gain a certain potency, even if we fail to recognize their frail substance. Counting syllables is futile. Searching for stresses is only a game played for our own amusement. Best to take the signs as they come, realize they are not calling out to us, they just are. And then this is page 35. Is it simply about fitting form to purpose, or purpose finding the form it needs to express itself? Either way, words get tangled up in the process, convey or obscure density and depth. A way of putting it, a way of recovering it. And then 66 through 67. And then there is the immediate intimacy of waking in a strange bed in a strange town and hearing the same birds singing in the same trees, or hearing the rain come down in the same manner as it did elsewhere. Perhaps we place far too much importance on decipherment, on somehow being able to understand the world behind the world, or the word behind the word. What does it really get us but a devious or deviant chain of transmission? It's just another method of flawed pattern making. Some conclusion, I suppose, even that. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that last poem like really hits it home for like a big strand of thinking that my grandfather and I were constantly talking about for hours on the phone, of the emptiness in looking for meaning and sort of the process or the throughness is always where the meat is versus some sort of definition or explanation. And it's funny that my mom read a list that my grandparents made together, because I also have a list that my grandparents made together that I carry around in my notebook as just a sort of reminder of them and this, the best way to live, I think, lessons learned from my grandparents. This is an older list, I think, and it's also a must-haves for, I have to assume that every juncture in life, or every couple months, maybe every year, whenever the inspiration struck to find some newness, they sat together and wrote a list. This is a list of must-haves for them. Access and contact with family, but the how could be different than a traditional sense. Number 2 is time for own pursuits, whatever they may be at any time, any place. Must be possible in all figurations. Home, however minimal. Travel and education, essential to staying alive. Complete level of service to our own family and to others. Like, but could do without. This one I also really like. There are lists of, take it or leave it. Active social life, a select few suffice, involvement in many local things. Who could be essential? And then we have a list of friends and family, all who are actually in this Zoom today, so I won't read it aloud. And then can't continue no matter what. Mindless lists, ignoring the condition we are living in with each other and everything around us. So just always being present, being together, that joie de vivre, that sort of roll of the dice. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful.
Good to see you. Love to all.
Thank you all for everything and for joining us and for helping to bring this wonderful person and book back to life even for a little while. So I'm going to turn off the recording. By the way, I was recording this event so that we will put it up on the Wet Cement website. You can share it with people later. It might take a few days for that to happen, and I'll let you know when it's ready. But in the meantime, I'll turn recording off, and if we want to have just a conversation among yourselves, we can do that as well. So before I do that, I want to thank you all again, and particularly thank John and Andrea for really pulling this together and contacting you all and doing the hard work to make this such a wonderful event. So thank you.